Hey, it's Veronica with Craft Review. Today I'm making a faux fur tail that swishes naturally back and forth. First I have a pair of scissors, a piece of faux fur measuring 20 by 5 inches with the fur running long ways. But this is easy to customize if you want a tail that's longer or shorter. And then I'll also need some sewing pins, thread, and a needle. I'm going to use an embroidery needle because it's a little heavier duty than a regular needle, and that works well on the faux fur. For other tools I'm using, I'm going to use something to help turn the tail inside out. And for that, I'm going to use this knife honing tool, but you could use anything from the blunt end of a chopstick to a marker to a thin wooden dowel. Any of those will work. And then I also am going to use a comb. I'm starting by folding my fabric in half, hot dog style, and at the end where the fur is hanging off of the fabric, I'm going to start pinning that end shut. And then I'm going to move my way up the side of the tail, matching up the sides and pinning it as I go. But I'm going to stop when I get to the top. I don't want to pin the other end shut. I'm just going to stop when I'm done pinning the sides. Now I just need to grab a needle and thread. And I do have a video on threading a needle for sewing faux fur if you want to watch that. I just use a lot of extra thread. Double checking that I have the fur hanging down on the correct end here. I'm going to start sewing this end shut using a simple back stitch. And I'm using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. It doesn't need to be exact though. Faux fur is really forgiving, so thankfully the stitches and the seam, they don't need to be perfect. And I'll just continue up the bottom and the sides of the tail, removing the pins as I go. I will need to rethread my needle a few times, but that's fine. I can just rethread and then pick up where I left off. And then I'll keep stitching up toward the top of the tail, making sure not to stitch the other end shut. I'm going to leave that open. And then I'll do a couple back stitches and double knot and tie off. And after I've clipped my thread, before I turn the tail, I'm going to clip the corners first. So at the bottom corners of the tail here, I'm going to clip across very close to the corner, being careful not to clip any of my stitches I've made. I'm going to do that on both sides. And then also on the folded corner, like this. And this is just to make it easier when I turn the tail. The corner won't get bundled up. Then I'm going to take my knife honing tool, and at the top edge of the tail, the open end, I'm going to start turning that like this, and just get it started by a few inches. And now it's going to look like this. And to make it a lot easier, I'm going to use this knife honing tool to push the rest of the tail so that it's outside out. And when I'm done, it'll look like this. It only takes a second. It's starting to look like a tail, but especially on the other side with the seam, there's a lot of fur stuck in that seam and it looks pretty bad. So what I'm going to do is take a comb, and starting at the bottom, I'm going to slowly work all that fur out of that seam. And then I'll just work my way up across the seam to the top of the tail. And this will take a few minutes. And then I'll give it one final comb. And once more, I'm going to take a needle and thread. And that top of the tail that's still open, you can see the inside of it here. I don't want that to stay hanging open, so I'm going to turn that in by about a 1/2 inch. Like this. And I'm not going to pin it or anything, I'm just going to hold it shut while I do this. I'm going to put a few tacking stitches in there to hold it closed. About 5 or 6 stitches will be enough. And then once I'm done with that, I'm going to do a secure double knot. And then cut the end of my thread. And once again, I'm going to need to use that comb to get the fur out of those stitches. But that'll only take a second, and then my tail is finished. And it'll look like this. And to attach my tail, I'm going to use 2 safety pins, but if you wanted to add a loop in the previous step, that would be super easy to do. And as you can see, this type of tail swishes naturally back and forth, and it's just a nice, easy project to make. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below, and if you want to subscribe to my channel Craft Review, I would love to have you. Thank you for watching. Bye.